So, folks, I want to introduce you and to our final panel for the day. And we're really lucky to have these folks on board who might have had to leave work early or had to do something to be here. Can these guys come up? I want to introduce you to the moderator for the next panel. He goes by the name of R.Chung. He is the producer and host a show called 100% Canadian on G98.7 FM. And he will be the moderator today on this panel with two really important folks. So I'd like to I'll let you introduce them, actually. And it will be somewhat of a three-person conversation that will be led by R.Chung.
Definitely. Can y'all make some noise one time for Mr. Mark Campbell, please? Excuse me, Professor. Professor Mark Campbell. Are you guys enjoying yourself? Are you guys learning a lot today?
Yes, sir.
You guys have seen the journey of where we've come from by way of Mr. Nelson and where we are now. So again, I go by the name of R.Chung, but for today's school purposes, I'll use my government, R.Chung. I am a host on G98.7 FM right here in Toronto. I host a little show called 100% Canadian. Oh, thank you, Ty. I appreciate that. Someone listens. I hosted alongside my good friend Philly, Big Philly, and if you do R&B, hip-hop, reggae, soca, come talk to me after the show, and hopefully we can get your song some spins. Hi, Mrs. Amanda Paris. Make some noise for Miss Paris in the building, too. CBC. Amazing. But that is a little gist of who I am, but the main importance of what we're here for is to talk about the evolution of where we've come from and to where we are now. So I'm actually going to call up the first panelist. His nickname is very familiar in the Toronto DJ, I guess I can use the word diaspora. I guess you can say that. SoundQuest is the name. And he used to go by a name, or he still goes by the name of Boogeyman. Now, of course, if y'all know who Boogeyman is, this guy can mix. And listen, this is all what Back and Forth told me. This guy can mix. I wasn't allowed in parties. I'm a young cat. But Ty Harper, if you can get Ty Harper to come up, make some noise one time for Ty Harper. Ty currently is the associate producer at Q at CBC Radio, right here in Toronto, of course. And in my eyes, he is an originator of where I'm at now today, being one of the major platforms on commercial radio to really have a voice for Canadian artists, especially in the urban circle right here in Toronto, and if not Canada. So make some noise one time again for Mr. Ty Boogeyman Harper.
You.
This next panelist the final panelist that will be joining us today is another co-creator of OTA Live alongside this young, handsome gentleman over here. He's kind of taken a different route in his quest for, I guess, how can I say it, Rez? He's a visionary. Let me put it that way. He's an amazing visionary. He's a producer, he's a director, and now I kind of overheard in a conversation he's going to be doing some stuff, but we'll talk about that secret in a little bit. So everybody make some noise one time again for another co-creator of OTA Live, Mr. Rez Dea. How you doing, sir? All right, so these are beautiful, handsome panels. Don't they look lovely today?
Hello. Hello.
So let's talk about, I mean, we kind of sat in the conversation earlier with DJ Ron Nelson. Before we kind of get into the meat of what we're talking about today, the evolution, I want to know about the first thing that kind of led you to wanting to do broadcasting or radio. Maybe it was that first song that kind of touched your ear and said, you know what, maybe I can do this. I mean, obviously, Ty, DJing all your life.
I'll let Rez go first.
All right.
Oh, man. I don't know, man. It's kind of like what Ron said. It just felt like a natural thing. I can't really pinpoint a specific moment. I think radio for me was like, okay, I love music, but I have no talent you know, like I can't sing, you know what I mean? I can't rap. And so radio just kind of felt like a cool place to be. And of course, growing up, like, you know, community radio was so important to me, you know what I mean? And I just loved the idea of that whole thing, man. And so just kind of fell into it that way.
And Ty, what was it?
I mean, for me, it was actually a knock on the door from Milestone Radio, and they were giving out petitions for what would become Flow, and I had no idea what I would do with my life, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool! Wow, a station that actually plays music with people that look like me," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do that," and that's pretty much it.
So then let's take it back. Let's say, for instance, I'm that little fly on the wall in 2005, right? And the producer says, "You're live to air. Let's go." What was that feeling like, that rush? Explain that day when you said, you know what, we're going to be catapulted, not knowing in your minds that you would be catapulting a lot of major artists in the city in regards to their success. What was that feeling like that first day in 2005 when OTA Live became?
Like when the show went on the air?
Yes.
I mean, yo, the thing is, man, like we were developing the show for 2 years before it went on the air. So I think like by that time it was just like, fuck, finally, man. Like let's just start this. You know what I mean?
I don't think anything that we did was rocket science, you know? Like I came up on Ron, I came up on college radio, and we, like everyone in the city knew that we needed to have something like this. It wasn't like deep, you know? So I think for us, we really, really planned how we were gonna sort of present this to Wayne Williams, who was the PD at the time. And so I guess we'd been there for what, 2-3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I had been at Flow since 2001. Like I went to school here, by the way. I went to Ryerson as well. And while I was here at Ryerson, I was interning at Flow. You know, that was my internship for like my credit or whatever at school. So you were there from same time, no? 2001, 2002?
I think I came in 2002.
Okay.
I looked at when the station came on and I said to myself, look, let's just wait a year and see what happens, you know? And I just waited and watched to see what was happening. And then I applied.
Yeah.
It took maybe 6 months. And I mean, we went into it, I guess, thinking about it the way television does stuff, right? Like you have pilots, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we thought we would, if we really believed in what we were doing, we would actually create it. So we did basically the first season of OTA Live before we even knew we would have the show. And we pitched that when we were done with that full season, right? So
yeah,
it was a lot of work.
I mean, it was obviously rocky at the start too, man. Like we had done on air, like I was on air doing overnights and like kind of just shift work and stuff. Same with Ty, we were doing like, were you Monday nights or Tuesday nights or something? 1 o'clock?
I have no idea.
Like we were both over, like I was like Monday night, 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. type of thing, right? To like, cause Wayne was like, look, let's try you guys out. Let's try you out. Just not doing a show, just introducing music like regular hosts, right? And so we had already kind of broken the ice as far as being live on the air and going through that process of, you know, stumbling and freezing up and being nervous and all that, right? And during that whole time, we're developing the show. So I think like the day that we actually started, we were just like so hungry to like start that we were just like, yo, let's just do it, man.
But in regards to, like, say, for instance, community radio, I mean, something like a CHRY, CKLN, the impact is not as great as to say, you know what, I have a song on a CBC radio, or I have a song on a G98.7, shameless plug there, or I have a song at that time, it was a Flow 93.5. I don't think you guys understood the impact that you guys would have earlier during those times. Now, this is kind of my segue to my first question. Now, what has been the lasting impact of commercial radio on hip hop in Toronto and other cities? And I have to really stress that at a time when I was listening at Tuesday nights at 11 o'clock, when I had to be up for school the next morning, it was like I was hungry to hear what the city had to offer. So from your standpoint, from your standpoint, what's the lasting impact that you guys have had? And I say you guys because you guys have had a lasting impact in the city. What was that feeling like, or
Well, it's kind of like what he said earlier, man. It's like we weren't doing anything different than what, Ron, DJX, Real Freaks, DTS, everybody was doing. You know what I mean? Like, obviously different format, different station, but that feeling that you had as a kid being like, I need to tune in at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. That's how I felt as a kid when I was like, I need to find the underground hip hop show that's on at, whatever time it is on whatever day. You know what I'm saying? It's the same feeling. And that's just a product of just, I guess catering to an audience that we knew was not being catered to. You talk to when you talk about commercial radio, the difference is that it just opens it up to a bigger audience. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, but what we tried to do is keep that essence of like what Ron was talking about, that essence of community radio, right? And that purity of like the culture and the music, and bring it to commercial radio, And I think for us, that's why it kind of has left this kind of lasting impression, I guess,
And I don't think you could really call anything that we were doing a lasting impression, if not without acknowledging that, again, we come from a rich history of hip hop programming in the city, and we're kind of just building off of that. The only difference between what we were doing and sort of what Ron and X and everyone else was doing is that we were on a station that was playing black music 24/7. If CKLN was playing that 24/7, it would probably have had the same impact. So, I mean, it's not really us. It's the platform that we were lucky enough to be around to be a part of at that moment.
All right, so I'm gonna kind of pick your brains for a little bit. I think I love the fact that we can kind of go back into time, and are you guys familiar with Vice? Vice.com, Noisy.com. Noisy actually did a piece on these guys 2 years ago. I believe it was in last year. 2 years ago in 2015, and they did a piece about these two gentlemen over here. So if outside brands are looking at you, it kind of shows that your impact has been is very vital for the city. Now, like I said, let me kind of go back to 2005. Let me see if you guys can remember how you produced your show. Because I remember there was always like you always paid homage to the oldies, to the classics, to the originators of the sound, of the urban sound. And then you guys would have an interview. I'm going to touch into a specific interview in a little bit, but break down how it was for you, especially for those students that are here that are broadcasting students. What was the process like in producing a show like OTA Live?
Well, again, off the top, we produced the first season of the show before we even got a green light on it. So in our mind, if we did get the green light, we would be a season ahead. So we were always ahead. It was always about creating a template where you were producing content that eventually would become either evergreen or this sort of like cycle where it was self-sustaining.
Yeah, so you weren't scrambling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what we were thinking ahead of time.
But hold on, just because like for those that don't know, like the main kind of chunk of production on our show was a 30-minute biography special on a different artist every week, right? So we would, do the unauthorized biography of whoever. Like one of the first ones we aired was Biggie, right? So it's a 30-minute special on Biggie. It's like a VH1 behind the music type style production. Narration, a lot of music. It's all mixed together and produced well. But like something like that, those take 30, 40 hours to make, right? So when you ask about what was it like, it was just a lot of time in the studio, like just making stuff and not getting paid to do that,
And that was a 2-week production schedule, 1 week of writing and researching. Yeah. We actually sort of like interviewed interns that we had at the time that actually were from Ryerson. And so we had that 2-week production schedule of 1 week writing, the actual scripts, and then another week where Rez would put together the actual edits.
Yeah, and this is like evenings, because we're both like trying to work and make money and stuff, right? So it's like, it was a lot, man. It was a lot.
You can hear a lot of passion in what the key that I've kind of learned in this broadcasting in my short years is if you don't have the passion to do it, just don't do it. It's that simple. So it goes along in regards to music. Rez, you're doing film. Ty, you're producing for probably one of the biggest radio stations or companies in Canada. So the passion will take you a long way. Now, I'm going to touch into this specific interview because I believe this was, and I speaking to Back and Forth, which is a mutual friend of ours, and he kind of had a little seat, in OTA. And I'll be honest with you, 2005, between that period was probably one of the best times of music, I guess I can say Canadian music, because a lot of artists that you're hearing about, but they weren't really springing out. And the place that you kind of had to get crowned in order for your music to really take form was a show like a OTA Live. Not to digress or not to negate anything that community radio had, but these guys were a staple. Now, a young gentleman at the time, Aubrey Drake Graham, is probably known as one of your most infamous interviews. And I believe that was during the time of when he was doing, was it So Far Gone?
No, this was probably 2 years before that. That interview was 2006.
So
I
comeback.
think. Comeback
Maybe
season?
comeback season, yeah. Because I think he was working with Aeon Clark at the time, but I won't say that.
Yeah.
Oh, you know about Voice. Now, which leads to my next question. This is a great segue. We understand that there are different opportunities that can arise in community radio. So, with the free will to have an artist come in pretty much every day, as opposed to commercial radio where you have regulated standards that you strictly got to play music, have 10% here, have 10% here, but it has to be strictly music. What were different opportunities that you guys saw successful for Canadian hip hop artists to really come on your show and to really shine?
Well, you know what, man? Like, you touched on an important thing. Like, we were fortunate to be able to do whatever we want, Like, we were probably one of the only shows, like, there was specialty shows, there was probably 3 or 4 specialty shows that could kind of do whatever they wanted to do. And we were one of those shows. And that's kind of rare, you know what I mean? And we were really blessed to be able to do that because, like, they just... Wayne, I don't know why Wayne trusted us, man, but he just let us do what we wanted to do.
And let's not confuse doing whatever we want to do with just not caring. Like,
no,
just
of course not. Yeah.
Obviously having the opportunity to like really think about what we wanted to do and put together a show that kind of reflected what we thought made sense, and it worked. I mean, again, it wasn't really rocket science. It was hard work, but it wasn't rocket science. We knew that the city wanted this because we were of the city, and it was reflected in the ratings, right? We were the #1 show in our time slot. So was the soca show. So was the dancehall show. So was the other hip-hop show. It just sort of like spoke to the fact that this music and what we were doing mattered in the city and actually reflected itself in the actual metrics that mattered to the larger sort of like white mainstream.
All right. Are you guys learning something so far? Are you guys listening? Hope you guys are paying attention. Which leads, I see somebody taking notes over there, which leads to my next question. This is kind of off the cuff. Now, and we're going to go back into the journey of OTA Live and, the evolution of hip hop radio. But something like a CityOnMyBack.com was and is still vital for the city and if not the country. What led you guys to really, I guess, evolve from taking OTA Live to now continuing that same journey into the website?
Yeah, man. I mean, again, it's like, okay, so we're doing, the interviews and stuff on our show. This was like 2006, 5, 6, and we were, videotaping, putting clips up on YouTube. We had a partnership with Much Music at the time where we would make little video clips of interviews. They'd go on muchmusic.com, and then they'd like push back to, watch the full episode or whatever on YouTube or whatever. So this was like early YouTube, we're doing like what kind of like the Breakfast Club and all these radio shows are doing now, right? We were doing that back then, and it's kind of like at that same time was like when all the blogs started popping up, Two Dope Boys, Not Right, right, all of that stuff, and really the influence of that was becoming really clear as far as like how the world was finding new music, right? So it just was like another natural thing, man. We were just like, look, we're doing this. So we had started this thing called the Mega City Countdown, which was a top 10 weekly Toronto-based countdown show. And to complement that, we started the blog because it's like there's so much music, and we were only playing like the top 10 songs every week. And so we needed a home to kind of just show love and support to the actual rest of the scene, you know? So the blog was just kind of like a natural next step, you know?
And it was also like just the idea of just building structure, like a structure that could be consistent and sustainable. So always from the very beginning, the idea was that the show would be the foundation, and from that foundation you build out. And so the show is the radio show, and then what do we have? We had the Mega City Countdown, the Mega City Sleeper,
Yeah, segment.
Classic in the
Bits.
Sleeper. We had
Yeah.
the Classic in the Sleeper, and then we went to the Countdown, and we reached out to Hip Hop Canada because we knew Hip Hop Canada was a big deal. So it was important for us to not just do what we were doing, but also connect with other sort of institutions in our mind that were doing the same thing. Hip Hop Canada connected with us. We had the Mega City Countdown, and from there we were able to then do the blog. So it was just trying to build out and try our best to like reflect what was happening in the city.
So, if I can, I love picking brains. That's why I love this seat. That's why I don't like being a panelist, because you're the one that has to think. But I love to pick brains. Now, obviously, the show had its run of success. Now, talking to a couple people prior to this event, once upon a time they had thought that hip hop on radio was going to be a little bit of a short-lived phenomenon. So maybe for the 2-3 years, okay, we'll hear a Drake here, we'll hear this, we'll hear that here, especially if you're a Canadian artist. Do you believe in that stigma that hip hop has kind of had its, you know, place in Canadian radio for a little bit of time? Hopefully I see Ty thinking. Am I making sense of that question?
Can you say it again?
So I'm thinking. So what I'm saying is, hip hop in Canada on Canadian radio has been somewhat deemed as a short-lived phenomenon. So, for instance, now, and I'm gonna kind of go towards like the end of the flow days, you wouldn't hear as much Canadian hip hop prevalent to say a pop or urban pop that was added to Flow's playlist, or, you know, for instance, my radio station G98.7, we didn't really have. We've only had like a little bit of stigma of sprinkling hip hop here and there, but it wasn't supposed to really be like that. Do you believe that hip hop is a short phenomenon in Canadian hip hop or Canadian radio?
I mean, it's not that it's a short phenomenon. It's that we're in 2017 and like it's still not right. Like it's still not how it needs to be here, you know? I mean, yeah, man. It's not that it's a short phenomenon. It's that people haven't figured out how to, I guess, sustain, or I don't know, man. It's like I don't know. I mean, it's like we always talk about, man. It's like you know, if we could like run a station, you know, and not, it's okay if the ratings aren't competing with Chum. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think anyone thinks that a local, like a Flow should not be competing with Chum. You know what I'm saying? It's okay that it's a little less in the ratings than like a Chum or CHFI. You know what I mean? And it's like, how do you just sustain that so that culturally that is always there, right? Because that is what is missing. And it's unfortunate that it has been a short-lived thing. It's unfortunate that Flow only lasted that 10 years, you know, and many would argue that, you know, there was a lot of things that they did that were great, and a lot of things that they did that kind of maybe not helped, but led them the way that it went. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. It's complicated, man. It's a complicated discussion. I mean,
Yeah, it is very complicated. I think at the very least, like you can say that before Flow, you would not have heard a local artist besides maybe Maestro or maybe Mishi on commercial Toronto radio. And after Flow, now you can hear a Drake or a Tory Lanez or The Weeknd. I mean, it's normal to hear that stuff, right? So I don't know what that means, but there's that.
All right. Well, this leads to my next question right here. How, if at all, does commercial radio enhance or supplement community hip hop radio? So we obviously see there's two different contrasts with that.
yeah. I mean, it's pros and cons, man. I mean, like a show like our show, like I said earlier, we try to keep that same essence of community radio and just bring it to a commercial platform. That means a higher production value. That means higher audience. You know what I mean? Hopefully a bigger impact. Like when you play those songs, like it's like when Ron was saying, like it was so exciting for people to hear their songs like on the radio. It's the same feeling, It's just with commercial, with Flow, it was a bigger impact. Just because there's more listeners. It's just the physics of having more listeners, more ears, right? But then the negative of it is like, well, if you're not careful, then you have like what Flow is now, which is like has no essence, or the move is now has no essence of what is needed and why community radio is important, right? So it's like commercial radio can either enhance what is needed for the community, or it can turn its back on the community, And we try to make sure that we always enhance that feeling.
Ty, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I feel like kind of answered that. But that is even too a complicated question, because I feel like they're not really something that are there to compete with each other. Community radio is community radio for a specific purpose, and commercial radio is its own thing. And there are like issues in community radio that are specific to community radio, and in commercial radio that are specific to that.
So two different conundrums.
They both should be there for very specific purposes.
And and I believe they play their own role. They play their own, because as opposed to say, for instance, now I'm sure you've had, and not to negate any bad artists, I'm sure if you've had artists in your celebratoire time during OTA Live that have come up to you and saying, hey, can you guys consider playing my song? Then you guys go back to hearing the song, and you're like, well, I don't know if we could really play this. Has that ever gone through your mind whenever an artist would come and submit music to you, in a sense?
Oh, of course. That just comes with the actual, that's what we do. Like, we're radio people. We connect with the community. We have people that want to have their stuff played, and there's that conversation that could be awkward about whether your song is good or not. But it's just something you got to deal with, right? Like, it just is what it is. I mean,
I'm sure you deal with the same thing
every day.
But you know what? The key to that, man, is like, I feel like honesty is the best policy. And like when you're, if you're able to just tell someone straight up, like there's many an email where, an artist 5 years later has been like, look, man, I really took your advice. You know what I mean? Or, I remember when I gave you my first song and you actually like responded, I think it's natural that artists are always going to have that thing where they're like, hey, play my song. And it's up to, DJs, radio people, bloggers, whoever, to just have that communication that's open, just be honest and talk about it.
Now, again, here's my picking of the brain question. If you were to do or choose one thing to do to really enhance Canadian hip hop in radio platforms, and I'm talking community and commercially, what would it be? Because I'm tending to see like a little bit of a failure that we've kind of reached out to every other genre of music, especially in this time and age, except the hip hop artist. And sometimes you'll get the backlash. Well, this radio station, they're not playing my song. That radio station's not playing my song. What are we doing wrong? If I can pose that question to you,
who's the we?
I guess you can say commercial broadcasters. And not to negate what the CRTC regulates us to do, and of course you guys know what the CRTC is, But if you were to be that person and say, you know what, I can flip what the CRTC says, this is what we're going to do to really enhance the spirit and the culture of hip hop music in radio, commercial radio.
Just have programs that play Canadian stuff, Toronto stuff.
I don't know, man. It's just Canada's just failed over and over and over again. You know, it's like we just don't have a station, man. We just don't have a station.
I mean, and obviously, systemically, it's deeper than that. I mean, there's an institutional racism that just makes it tough for, again, even when our shows were performing. I mean, think about what I'm saying here. Like, the reggae shows were #1 in their time slot. The soca shows were #1 in their time slot. Our shows were #1 in our time slot. And even when we met those metrics, we weren't able to get the advertising that you would have expected for a show that's #1 in its time slot. I mean, that is like textbook institutional racism. So like, even when we try to do the things that they say we need to do, we're just not getting the support. And so you're not getting the revenue that you need. And if you don't get the revenue, then, that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, man. That's it. And that's, yeah, that's it, man. It's just a big, big, big problem in our country, And I feel for all of its flaws that Flow had, it's like for those years we actually had something, you know what I'm saying? That was a special time for many reasons, you know what I mean? Because I don't know when we're gonna have a station like that again, I don't know if it's ever gonna happen.
I think we do, but we'll talk about that a little bit.
No, but shout out to G that's doing, what they're doing. Obviously, we could critique, certain things, but I mean, you're doing exactly what we're doing, right? Like, you're this generation sort of like Canadian programming for like people that just don't know what's up. They look to your show for the very same thing that they were looking to our show for.
Of course.
And there's still great things happening at, CHRY. There's still great things happening in radio at the commercial level and the community level.
I will shine a light on CBC Radio because big shout outs to Errol Nazareth. He does a big job still promoting new artists. He tunes in every Monday too, which I found out. And Amanda sometimes, I think you do sometimes, because sometimes she'll tweet me and she'll be like, hey, doing a great job, because it's that extension, because I know that, hey, if someone like her on a big platform who's also pushing our music, our artists in a way, I think we need to kind of put our hands together for that. Put your hands together for what we're doing, what you guys are doing for pushing that artistry. Now, this probably leads me to my last question, and I want to find out what's going on in the mind of you guys post OTA Live. And I think I had posed a question earlier, just in a different form. What are the challenges of commercial radio in respect to hip hop in large and small markets across Canada? So I think we touched on a little bit, just a little bit.
Say it one more time.
So what are the challenges that, give me 1 second. What are the challenges of commercial radio in respect to hip hop in large and small markets across Canada? So not just Toronto now. Because we're tending to see that other than Toronto, other than Vancouver, the major cities, there's a big epidemic of hip hop not being seen, or that light hasn't been shone on.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to remember, like, when Flow got its license in whatever year that was, 99 or 2000, when it launched in 2001, hip hop urban stations launched all across Canada. The Beat in Vancouver, I think it was Hot something in Ottawa. Vibe, I think it was in Calgary or Edmonton. Like, everyone tried to do it, Flow was the only black-owned station, and all of those all those stations flopped in like a year or two, and they turned to pop stations, top 40 stations, So, what are the challenges? I mean, shit, man, the challenges are like insurmountable, it seems, in this country. Flow lasted 10 years as a commercial black hip hop R&B station. You know what I mean? So like I said, like, that was, for all its flaws, an amazing little ride, a great moment in time, Now we have G as a black owned station. I'm not trying to discredit what G's doing, but it's definitely catering slightly differently to what Flow is doing, you know, and the impact is just slightly different than what Flow is trying to do, you know, and that's fine, that's cool. Like I think I love G, like it definitely has a place. But the challenges are huge, man. It's like what Ty was saying. It's like how do you, and it's this still seems so crazy that this music, which is number one everywhere in the world, and Toronto now being literally the number one place to find hip hop and R&B music, and there's still like people can't figure it out in this country, you know, and it's crazy, man. It's just crazy.
Ty, did you want to add to that too? Because you kind of touched on that point of systemic racism. Can you elaborate on why you kind of chose that in regards to the whole hip hop scene in Canada?
I mean, racism is just what it is, right? It's racism. It's discrimination. Why do people feel that way about our music and the people that want to hear that music? I mean, that's a question you'd have to ask the sort of white mainstream that controls this larger system here in Canada. I can't answer that question. But again, when we meet the expectations and the metrics that they ask us to do, we end up with nothing. I mean, what more do you want? Like, we're number one in our time slot. You know, there's nothing else we can do.
Like, dude,
You know?
when we got fired, man, so we went through like a mass firing thing, right, at Flow. And it was Chum at the time, before Bell had bought Chum, right? I don't know about you, but I got brought into a room, and well, we all got brought into rooms or whatever. But like, I got brought into the room, and they fired me as if I was like a technician who just was operating the board. Like they literally had no idea about what OTA Live was, what it does, what it did, like none of that. It was just, they're just like, we don't need you anymore. Like, you know what I'm saying? And like literally no idea, you know? Like in the history of like radio, like there's radio award shows, there's radio this, there's a whole industry of radio. No one knows about OTA Live, you know? Like no one knows about our bios or what we did or any of that stuff. They don't know about our production, nothing, you know? And it's just like this huge, bigger issue, you know what I'm saying? That like, and for us, it's like, we just got to do what we do, you know? We just do what we do. And it's like, that's just what it is, man. It's just a bigger problem.
And also just, again, really thinking about that. I mean, aside from the fact that, again, our show is successful, but I want to reiterate, like, the Soca show was the number one show in its time slot for 10
years. Yeah.
For 10 years. The dance hall show, shouts to Specs. I mean, you know, like, these guys were putting in work and got nothing in return, like nothing. So it's like, again, what more do you want from us? We're proving that this music is necessary and people are listening to it and they love it. It's really back on the actual institutions that refuse to actually support it.
See, I wouldn't have even known that. So that's kind of like an eye-opener to me. So
Because you picked our brains, man.
that's what I'm supposed to do as the moderator. Now, let's skip ahead a few years after. I mean, you guys are obviously living your own individual lives, creating or recreating, creating. And an article like a noisy.com picks up and says, you know what, let's shine a light on these guys to those that were unfamiliar with what these guys were doing for Canadian hip hop. I just want to know your process during that time. Like, whoa, somebody's actually really paying attention. How was that like when they reached out to you and said, you know what, we want to really piece and put this together and really talk about you guys as, you know, a couple of innovators?
Well, I mean, it's important to understand that wasn't like Noisy in the States wasn't like, oh my gosh, this amazing show in Toronto, we need to like pay homage. I mean, that is a reflection of like Jabari, who is a Toronto kid that came up on our stuff, that works for Noisy, that wanted to pay homage to the show. I'm not going to act as if like Noisy in the States cares. They don't care. They have a Canadian sort of arm of what they do, and the kid there, Jabari, came up on our stuff. You know, it's that simple.
Yeah, it was great, man. I mean, it was bittersweet, but great, you know? It's like anytime I mean, yo, man, it's what are we 2017 now? So 6 years later, and it's like, every time someone says, "Yo, what's going on with?" I'm like, "Fuck, man, just stop, man." It's like I don't know what's going on with it. It hurts. Like anytime I'm forced to like remember that feeling of like, cause like that was our baby. Like when you were trying to find the word earlier, and you picked the word visionary, right? For me, I was like, all right, I'll take that, but nah. But like we're creators, and that wasn't a radio show where someone just introduces songs that they're told to play. Like that was literally our baby. That was like our heart and sweat and soul. You know what I'm saying? And so when that got taken away in the way that it did, like it really hurt. And so it was definitely bittersweet. He did such a great job on that article, but it sucks, man. It sucks.
I think I'm going to quote that. It sucks. And I think that's why it's important to have avenues like this for Canadian music, because at the end of the day, they can see a Drake, they can see a Tory Lanez, they can see any of these reputable artists coming out of our country. But then there's that like 1% that never gets their shine. I think it was important for something like a OTA Live, and of course, you're still continuing the City on My Back blog, to really shine a light on those artists that say, we don't get paid enough attention. And we're actually, I can only speak for myself, being a kid that really looked up to you guys and really say, you've made a way for us to evolve that sound and to really make it to what it is now. So I want to thank you guys for really opening up and really saying, you know what, we're going to give you our baby for the some odd year. So make some noise one time for these guys, everybody.
Thanks, man.
And also important to like really thank the artists, because I mean, a show like this cannot exist without the actual artists in the city that are putting out the high degree of music that requires a program like us to exist. So
Yeah.
I mean, it really is a testament to the great artists that have been coming out of the city since, 87, 88, back with Ron. And we're also living sort of proof of like just the amazing sort of stuff that's coming out of the city.
Yeah. And like just to add too, man, like you know how Instagram I call us a bunch of kooky radio people?
Very kooky people.
Yeah, because it's like radio people will never will always be in the background. That's okay. You love music, like, so you're just privileged and lucky to be able to work in a field that you love, and that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not up here trying to say like we all deserve like all this shine like artists do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's just that for us, OTA Live could be doing so many cool things right now still, and so that's the part that is just kind of like what makes it bittersweet,
Man, I'm feeling a little bit touchy because, like I said, this is years for me. Now, let's talk about life outside of OTA. What are the two of you? I had quickly mentioned in your quick little short intros, but life after OTA, what is Rez doing to really further the movement of Canadian music? Because I've seen your playlist on your Instagram, and it's pretty packed with Canadian artists on there.
Yeah, okay, so well, we're doing a lot still. I mean, so like you said, we have our blog, cityonmyback.com. We recently started a monthly playlist on SoundCloud. So SoundCloud/cityonmyback. It's just 10 to 12 or 13 like, best songs of the month or whatever. And then I recently got a gig, I guess, a job with this new company called Deus. So they have a digital channel on iHeartRadio.ca, or you can get the app, the iHeartRadio app. And I'm basically programming and producing like a hip hop channel. So, yeah.
Make some noise for that, everybody. So
we're playing 50% Canadian music. And it's a 24-hour music stream right now. It's like a lot of local stuff mixed with hits, obviously, classics, old school, a lot of new music. So you can check that out. So I'm basically programming that and producing, like, basically everything you hear on there is I either produced or, programmed, basically.
that's what's up. Now, Ty, what is the Boogeyman doing these days?
The Boogeyman, he rarely DJs, so I have no idea what he's up to. Right now I'm at the CBC. I'm a producer over at Q. Was lucky enough to have worked with Shad, who was an amazing host and brought me in when he came in to do Q. And I'm still there with the new host, Tom Power, amazing guy as well too, and just always scheming, trying to find a way to get Toronto and Canadian music on the air again. So
That's what's up. This is OTA Live, everybody. This is Ty and Rez. Everybody make some noise. I think we have some time still. So does anybody have any questions they would like to just I believe there's a mic right there and there's a mic right here. So if you want to just jump up and I'll kind of rotate back and forth. No pun intended, back and forth. Go ahead, man.
I had a question. I don't know if I want to answer it now. I feel weird because you said it's kind of bittersweet, so you can pass on answering it. It was about OTA, right? The unauthorized biography. Firstly, that was an ill concept. I enjoyed that. I learned a lot. I really liked the Maestro Fresh one. I learned a lot about that. And I don't know if it was the same thing or you did one or an interview with Ron Nelson, but anyway, that was an ill format. So I wanted to ask you if you could either say what was one of your favorite artists to do the biography on, or if you had an opportunity, who would you have done one on your top choice that you didn't get to do?
Oh man, we had a huge list of artists that we didn't get to do, man. Like there's so many, but did you say what was a favorite?
You could say either your favorite that you did do, or you could say what you didn't get to do.
Yeah.
I love his passion.
That's a good question, man. I really loved. Let me see if I can remember. I love doing like an artist like Sade or Prince. Yeah. And like it's funny because remember when Jabari interviewed us? So Jabari who did the Noisy article, right? He was like he actually mentioned the Sade bio because he was like, "Yo, you guys put me on the Sade." And I was like, "Get out of here, man." And he's like, "Yeah, because like when you're growing up, like your parents listen to Sade or whatever, and you're like, yeah, it's my parents' music, right? But like when you guys did it and you played it on Flow and you talked about like Sade, I was like, yeah, I loved it. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I think probably like the Sade one, Prince,
Outkast.
Outkast was cool, yeah. We did these producer ones, which are really cool. I remember the Neptunes one being really dope. Yeah, man.
I mean, for me, just being able to translate that into like sort of like reflecting the stories of like our local artists. So like the Cardi special that we did was great, and to have him come in and actually speak his truth in terms of his story was amazing. But then having like again like the elders like Ron and Farley Flex, Master T. For Black History Month, we'd have the OTA talks where we'd bring in the OGs, and those were just amazing moments to be able to connect with these people who sort of like gave us the start that we, that we needed, So
The originators. Let's get this lovely lady over here.
Hello. I don't know where to start, but I have to say, when I first heard OTA Live, I'm like, oh my God, like this answered my prayers. I was like, thank you, Jesus, like the black one, But I'm simply here to say thank you, because I don't think both of you understand the kind of artistry that you made my ears listen to. And most importantly, how in a number of ways, these kinds of shows, the OTA Live legacy, it has to be heard again. Because the current conditions of black music, not only in the US, but also here, I would argue it's kind of problematic, okay? When I hear mumble rap, I just want to break down and cry. But anyways, long story short, what I would like to ask you is, what do you think the future of black music in Canada is going to look like?
That's a great question.
I mean, it looks strong in some ways and not strong in other ways. I mean, there's a lot of success going on right now by a lot of artists, but not all of them are, let's say, critically on a certain level. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people are making hits and stuff right now, but we'll see like how long that certain thing lasts. But I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, the eyes are on Toronto for sure. So that's great for a lot of young artists coming up. A lot of young artists are really hungry, and they see like the difference. Like when we were coming up, is that look, man, like before Drake, everyone was hungry, you know? And there's always a scene, right? But after Drake, that hunger changed to like this like ravenous, like just, yes, like we can actually do this, you know? Like it's just insane now, like how hungry a lot of producers and songwriters and the type of connections people are making and stuff, you know? So the future is really bright for a lot of people, you know? Whether or not Canada as a mainstream, you know, broadcasting kind of place will pick up and catch up on a lot of that stuff is still remains to be seen. You know, the star system here is still not working for you know, Black artists. The touring world is still not really working here for Black artists. So there's still a lot of challenges, you know, but there's been some positives, I guess, recently.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Toronto has always had an amazing sort of roster of people, performers and thoughtful, critical broadcasters. I don't think the scene is any better as far as the talent goes. It's always been there. The question is whether we're going to have the support from the institutions that should be supporting us. And to that question, I mean, I got to be like Ta-Nehisi Coates, man. It's like you can just be like, what do you want me to say? Like, I wish I could say that things are going to get better. What I do know is that we're not going to stop. There's always going to be people like us that are pushing. And I'm really happy to see the young sort of like DJs and sort of culture movers and shakers that are coming up, because I feel like they are 10 times smarter than I was at that age, 10 times more critical and aware than I was. And
some of them are.
Yeah. But I feel like, if anything, I think that sort of group of young kids and young culture shakers are the ones that might actually change things. I mean, look at BLM, look at like all that stuff. I think all that stuff is really, really the beautiful things that I'm seeing that I really appreciate. And a great example right here too.
Amazing.
So my question is a little unfair because I ask Ty this all the time, and I just now know that there's cameras and a mic, and we're going to get documented.
This is
so,
good.
We're also here at Northside Hip Hop Archives, an event that an archival organization has organized. So I'm curious about all of the work that you guys did and the documentation of that, and the digital world that we live in now where it can be shared again. And I'm wondering about the possibility of you guys sharing some of the old work and as a documentation of what happened in Toronto and the hip hop scene and the amazing work that you did. I'm also thinking about the interview that I did with Ron recently, where he said, you know, as he gets older, he's not so much interested in what people are playing as what they have to say. And you guys had a really great balance between talk and playing music, right? You had a standpoint that you were coming from, a perspective, really strong sense of voice, and that's a rarity in radio programming, period, and especially in hip hop radio programming. So I'm just wondering about this idea of sharing the old stuff and putting that out there, whether it's in a space like this as an archival project or just digitally in the intersphere, so that the world who didn't get to experience OTA live in the moment is able to go back and check out that stuff?
That's a tough question. Only because, you know, we haven't given up on the possibility of that show coming back or something. And so part of the catch-22 is like, yes, we definitely understand the importance of that show as an archival, historical sort of reference to what was happening in that time. But there's also real capital out of the sort of biographies and the specials that we did. We have like lots of stuff, and so it's almost like there will come a time where I think we will, depending on what happens, just put it out there. But for now, it's kind of a yeah. there's bigger. It's leveraging the capital that you have with that and seeing what could possibly happen moving forward, because we haven't really given up on.
Could I ask a second part to that?
course.
If any, that's okay. Nobody else wants to ask. So with the whole idea of not giving up on the dream, there have been multiple other platforms that have come up since then. So G98 is one, Vibe as another sort of, I don't even know what space that necessarily occupies exactly. And now Deus with the iHeartRadio. And so I'm wondering about the decision to, I don't know if you guys did pitch to those platforms, or did the decision to do OTA again, if you ever decide to, this is such a personal question, but like, what have the pros and cons of deciding to do this again been over the past few years when various platforms have come up that you didn't necessarily go to?
Yeah, that's another complicated question.
Just unleash all of your baggage for me.
So G, we can just be real, I guess. Like when G started, they asked us about what we're doing, but they only wanted a certain type of bio from us. They didn't want the full spectrum of what OTA Live is, so we just were like, no, thank you. Vibe, no, I haven't spoken to them. Deus, I'm programming the Deus channel, so I guess I could just put it on if I wanted to, but I think I don't know, man. It's like if OTA Live, it's weird. Like it's been so long now that we can step back and just look at it objectively, or is it subjectively? No, objectively. So, and it's like, you know, it got taken away when it was at a peak, you know, and that's kind of left this weird, lingering, lasting impression thing where people are always asking us about it, you know, because it didn't get to ever fall off, you know what I mean? And it's like, to bring it back, I think has to be in a certain right way, you know, if it were to come back. So, and that's hard to do. That's complicated to do without like a platform like Flow, you know what I mean? So if we were to bring it back properly, because what he's talking about as far as the capital that we have, like, yeah, you know, I have a hard drive at home with 150 bios on it, you know? And it's like, what do you do with that, you know, when there's no station to play it on, right? And it's like, yeah, cool, like we could just put it up online, and maybe that would turn into a cool thing, but we always had a bigger vision of what a show can do. And, you know, as you know, like how to actually put together a show, not just a SoundCloud page, or, you know what I'm saying? And the bios are part of a show. They're not just, they were never designed to be a standalone thing by themselves, you know? So to just start something online, I feel would need the care and the patience and the design to create something for that platform, you know? And we're still thinking about like, okay, maybe there will be an opportunity somewhere for a show to come back where those bios can be part of a show where we can still talk about other stuff, right? Because the bios, like, there's no room to talk. They're produced. That's it, you know? So yeah, you know, it's just, I think it's because we still have that vision of a show, which has kind of, I guess, hindered our desire to just throw up the bios, you know, for people to just download, you know?
Yeah, and also because we just haven't really necessarily, I mean, have we really moved on? I mean, we still are in the scene. We still do stuff. I mean, I'm still a producer. I still do programming. He still does programming. We're not in our 70s, 80s. You know, like we're still pretty, you know, I'm healthy. So it's like, you know, it's so complicated.
But I think a documentary is needed, Rez. That's all I'm saying. You are the director, producer. And Ty, I mean, this is a historian, right? I guess I can deem you as a Canadian historian, like a Toronto hip hop historian in some senses. Along with my
One of
brother.
many great historians that are out there. Yeah.
But in my eyes, you're one of them. Let's take the next question over here.
Hi, guys. So in terms of talking about the evolution of hip-hop radio and maybe not so much in Canada, but in Toronto, which I'm much more familiar with. We had Ron's show in the 80s and Master Plan, 80s and 90s on campus radio. Then we got Flow in the 2000s. How did we wind up, and what do you make of the fact that currently we have the Move here in the city and it's throwbacks? I mean, how did we already get to the place where we're looking back at the classics and not really breaking new material? What does that say about where we are in the evolution?
Yeah, I mean, it's, first of all, Lori Beckstead used to be my teacher at Ryerson.
Taught me everything he knows.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's a regression. It's a regression, you know. It's just a sad truth of the country that we're in, and the inability to sustain a black station, you know, or, you know, we don't know the inner workings of Flow. Like, I don't know how much money they were making or why Denim Jolly wanted to sell. You know, he was getting up there. You know, maybe he wanted to retire. You know, maybe he wasn't making enough. You know, maybe, I don't know. You know, I don't know the inner workings of all that. I don't know if that decision was just a financial decision or a personal decision. Like, I don't know. All I know is when the corporation came and grabbed it, they just got rid of all the heart. They got rid of all the soul, you know? And that's just a crime in this country that happened. And, you know, there's no other station to go to, you know, and all they care about is the bottom line financially, and that's kind of where it ended up. Now, the thing is, like, for me, it's like, I don't understand how the bottom line financially can't also be playing new music. Like, there's so much new, great Toronto and just hip hop music in general, and everyone listens to it. And I don't understand how that can't be profitable. Like, I don't know what people are missing. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they don't know how to cater to the black community here, you know, and they're scared of, like, doing it right, or they don't know how to do it right, you know? I don't know, man. It's messed up because, like, we're all here. Like, we've all done radio. It's like no one's calling anyone to say, like, hey, how do we do this properly? You know, it's like...
Or what does that bottom line look like? Because, I mean, if we were to go before Flow even came on the air and said, you know, what would we need to do to make you sort of believe in programming for people that look like me? I would think it would be like what we did, which is, again, like, you know, a soca show, again, #1 in its time slot. You know, yes, it was late at night. But the point is, it's about, like, a glass, like, half full. Like, it has to start somewhere. And, you know, my point is that we were showing that there was something there. And the metrics showed it. So when we were performing, no one cared.
I'm sure if you got the sales team in here to talk, they'd have stories for days about, you know, the challenges they had selling the station for whatever reason, you know?
So, I mean, we all know how radio works, right? You need advertisers to buy in to what you do. And from what we know, like, advertisers were pretty much saying, like, that's fine and good and everything, but we just don't want to cater to that specific audience. So, I mean, at that point, like, there's nothing that we can do. It's not really an issue that you need to take up with us. It's the actual institutions the advertisers that have this set way of thinking about sort of black programming and black audiences.
So then Flow gets bought. They try different things. So they get rid of all the specialty shows across the board. No specialty shows. They went through probably 3 or 4 format changes, trying different things, you know. But the #1 rule or the #1 way to fail is to try to please everybody. You know, that's the #1 way to fail, and that's what they did. You know. And then ultimately they just said forget it and changed to the Move, and now they just play throwbacks. And I mean, it's another company now, I guess, that bought it again, or it moved or whatever. Yeah, no pun intended. Yeah. So, anyways, I don't know, man. It's crazy. It's totally crazy.
There's a PhD thesis in there somewhere for anybody who's thinking of doing 100%. Grad studies. Yeah. I also just wanted to add too. I think part of my theory about this is the idea that a lot of the radio stations, the commercial radio stations, are owned by very large corporations that are into telecommunications, television, as well as radio. So they're across all platforms. And radio is maybe bringing in, 4 or 5% of their revenues. And as long as it's profiting, and it is, the commercial radio stations are profiting, they'll just let them do what they're doing. And it's easier to just kind of let them play the big hits that have been tested and focus grouped and let them sound like every other radio station, because it's still kind of working. And what's happening is that the folks that are running those giant companies, they're not radio people. They're not passionate about radio, like a person like Denham Jolly, who fought to get that license for Flow, and had a real vision about what he wanted to do on the radio. And then, as you say, maybe he was getting on, decided to sell. Chum bought it. They wipe the slate clean, and they go back to, something pretty standard, right?
Yeah,
so I
what
think
they
that's
know.
part of the problem. Wouldn't it be lovely? Wouldn't it be amazing if people who are truly passionate about this medium and about the music were the owners of these stations and wanted to hear programming like what you guys had been doing on Flow, instead of just saying, as long as it's making us a few bucks, whatever.
Yeah, totally, yeah. Because they seem to forget that there's an entire community of people that don't feel a connection, right, to the media, to radio, because they're not being catered to.
Okay, so my question is as a RTA student, at the end of our program, we obviously want to get a job. So what do you think is the best asset to get a job in radio in general?
Do you want a job just in radio in general?
I want to be a radio DJ.
Like a host or like play music DJ?
Both.
But do you want to, does it matter what station you work for?
Well, I want to be a hip hop radio DJ specifically. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. So there's currently nowhere for you to really do that. You know? You could, there's G98.7, right? Which, you could talk to this guy about who to talk to get in there. I would definitely say that's probably your best bet as somewhere to intern or volunteer to kind of see how it works. You know what I'm saying? And see if that's somewhere that you want to be. Do you guys have you have DJs playing old school mixes, obviously, reggae,
Yeah, our
soca.
5 o'clock mix. Our 5 o'clock mix we do.
Yeah.
So for instance, I host a show called 100% Canadian, which is solely, as opposed, like I'm saying, it's if it wasn't for these guys, I wouldn't have the deep passion to hear about and really search for new artists. So we cater to that R&B, that hip hop, that reggae, that soca crowd that knows that, there's that group there hidden. So here I am now with our show to really make it happen. But can I add on to you what you're saying?
Yeah, of course.
And not to digress or not to downplay your passion. Keep going for it, whatever it is that you're doing. But in Canada, it's next to none. Because, and to add to what Ty was saying, the image of us, we're the number one music selling in the world right now, but we're still not profitable to the system.
Oh, we're profitable to the system.
Oh, we're profitable,
obviously.
but we're not. What's the word?
The system isn't interested in sort of us profiting off of our own thing. That's what it is. Because they play our music, right? They'll have the actual artists on their shows. They'll have hosts that don't look like us that play the music. So it's taking and not allowing us space to do what we need to do.
But yeah, man, for you, if you want to be a DJ, that's great. DJs are always going to be needed, and DJs are the foundation of everything that we do. Obviously, there's the whole club circuit. You might want to earn some stripes, like playing out. You could align yourself with an artist and become like an artist, a touring DJ, or that type of thing. On radio, there's just not a lot of. In Canada, there's just not a lot of options right now. Like when he said earlier about how you got that knock on the door, when Flo was looking for signatures, right? Like that was life changing for him. For me, I stayed, like I'm from Vancouver. I stayed in Toronto because of Flow, you know? And that's why I'm here, is because of because I came here for Ryerson for radio and television arts, and I stayed here because of Flow. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But because we don't have that anymore, it seems like there's a lot of opportunities for people that just aren't really the same as what we had, which is unfortunate, you know? Like I said, you have G, you could do the community thing and build your name as a DJ and as a personality and do other things that could get you some income too, you know what I mean? Yeah. But as far as radio, man, G98.7 is kind of where you need to be looking at if it's hip hop and R&B and stuff like that.
And if you really care about radio, like doing radio as a producer, like really focus on the basics of becoming an amazing editor, understanding how to craft scripts, understanding what it means to do a great interview. Those sort of basic sort of tools are stuff that you can take anywhere. And it's definitely paid off for me as far as like just being able to work in a space where I may not be doing what I want to do, but I have a skill set that is valuable.
Sure. Yeah, man, there's lots of radio work. Don't get it twisted. There's lots of radio work that you can find yourself doing. You know, it's just to be an on-air DJ and host of like a hip-hop thing, it's not really a career option these days, unfortunately.
It's never too much to learn. So try to learn everything to really sustain yourself in the business. You get what I'm saying? I started off as, what did I start off as again, Dave? As an intern. And three years later, I'm now hosting a Canadian show because of these guys, so grateful to that. But don't let the passion stop. That's all I can say and leave you with that one. Don't let the passion stop.
100%.
Because who knows, 10, 15 years from now, that it can obviously change.
You missed my pun, man.
Gotta give him
100%, I said.
Oh, fun. Next question.
Hi. I really liked this panel, especially because I think it's really important to share like your failures or your challenges as much as your successes. So I learned a lot through this panel. I'm also really excited about some of the politics you guys were bringing up and actually naming. So I'm from the art world, and I see a lot of parallels with what you're talking about. Like, you can actually meet those metrics and measure these stupid things that the government or different institutions want to be measured, but still that's not enough. And I think that's a really unique system of structures in Canada. Like, I think this is really specific to Canada as a kind, not as a kind of institutional racism, but as white supremacy, that we're even able to meet these things and still we're not supported. And I see that working as a container to keep communities down. And so, anyways, I was just really excited that this parallel we can share between these two different creative communities. And if you can think of any strategies, maybe, like you mentioned, just keep doing the work, just keep showing up and doing it. Do you think that it's important to do these things from the inside of institutions, from the outside, multiple ways? I don't know.
I think all those ways matter. I don't believe, obviously there's the argument of, you can't, you can't, what's the whole thing about the master's tools and can't dismantle it. I mean, I believe to dismantle anything, it has to be movement outside and inside, all over. So yeah, I think it all matters. Yeah.
All right, and we're gonna take 2 more questions after this lady over here. So if anybody has a couple more questions to ask, please see yourself.
Hi, my name is Lady Sharon. I'm a talk show host on Roots Reggae Hub, and digital radio has really been a big game changer. How can we use that as a platform to really, like a Canadian, like how he's using, all 100% Canadian artists and whatnot. How can we use that as a platform, as Ron Nelson did with Fantastic Voyage? Can't we still do it now,
Oh, of course. And there's just great platforms that are doing amazing things. I always talk about, CHRY 105.5, which it's interesting how they're doing their programming right now. Again, I don't think that this moment is unique. There have been moments like this before. There will be moments moving forward. And so I don't think we're like some sort of a pinnacle of an amazing sort of thing. I think this is just a moment where people like us are fighting to be reflected in the space that they exist in. And that's going to keep happening. And what you're doing is no different than what we're doing. And it just keeps happening. And what happens is, you know what, like people have a moment where they do this, and unfortunately, history gets forgotten, and then someone else does it, 10, 20 years down the line, and people forget that we were doing this, and it's created and it's looked at as a special sort of moment, but I don't think this moment itself is special. There have been people before us that did this, and there will continue to be people that are doing exactly what we're doing. So yes, what you're doing is valuable too.
There's a lot of history to be found, because
yes,
I found out the first hip hop concert in Toronto was with oh my gosh, Sugar Hill and the gang, and that's like from a Caribbean Calypsonian that brought them up here. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's a lot to be archived. Big up to Mark and all you guys. Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody have a question? One last question? Okay, I'm probably going to cap it off with this because I know we're kind of late for time. And I want your guys' honest, true opinion, and we're going to end off with this. Do you see a reemergence of Canadian hip hop in radio, truthfully speaking? Or will there be?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, it's a broad question. Like a reemergence of Canadian hip hop in radio. It's like
a flow. Like once upon a time.
Like, will there be another commercial hip hop radio station? Sure, I don't know, man. I have no idea. That's a great question. If you can raise a few mil, man, let's go do it. Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know. I hope so. I mean, I think it's important. I think it's necessary. Our city is just it's just turned, man. It's hype, and we don't have that hub, and I hope we can one day again, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm sure there's always going to be something that reflects the pressure to reflect ourselves. It may not be radio. I don't know that terrestrial radio is, terrestrial radio seemed to have everything going for it as far as it being like this thing that speaks specifically to what people in a locale are. Satellite radio doesn't do that. And so it kind of protected terrestrial radio for being this thing that exists and will always exist because people need to know about themselves. But this generation, I don't know that they actually care about radio, terrestrial radio, the way that we did. It hasn't been passed on the way, my father literally told me about BLK. Like, he was like, look, listen to this station. I don't think that there's going to be something like that happening again for that sort of intergenerational conversation. And when you miss that sort of like that moment, then the medium itself begins to lose its value.
But that's because it's not there,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Because it's not there, that moment where radio could sort of like be guaranteed to be part of the conversation moving forward is kind of lost. So it's just uncertain as to whether or not we're going to see another moment where, sure, there might be someone that can actually buy a station and create something like Flow or something like G, but will there be actual people that care about it, that know about it? I don't know that it's going to exist moving forward.
We will see.
We definitely will see. Did you guys enjoy this conversation with Resentai? Special thanks to you guys for taking the time out to really sit, reflect of your time OTA, and just really having the insight of where you guys were then and where you are, where hip hop has gone back then and where we are now, and hopefully where we are to come in the future. Again, I go by the name of R.Chung, G98.7, 100% Canadian on Mondays. Oh, Mark, do you have a question or?
No, I wanted to
thank
you
you,
guys.
Thank you,
And
Mark.
thank you.
For
Make some noise one time for Mark.
Thank you.
Yes, Mark.